Welcome to the ninth edition of the Royal Ocean Racing Club Time Over Distance series. This week, our guest is Brad Butterworth. Brad has competed in 7 editions of the America's Cup, winning 4 times, and his winning streak of 16 consecutive races won is unequalled. Brad was watch captain for Peter Blake's Steinlager II in the 1989 Whitbread, and in recent years as tactician on George David's Rambler, taking line honours in the Rolex Fastnet Race, the Rolex Middle Sea Race, and both line honours and the race record for the RORC Caribbean 600. Brad joins us from New Zealand. Brad, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Louis. It's a privilege to talk to you on the career I've had, and also welcome to Waiheke in New Zealand. It's late at night here.
And I've heard a fantastic place. I've heard about the wine tours and the beautiful scenery.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can do when you come down for the America's Cup, if they let you in.
I hope so. I really do. I really do. Well, Brad, we're going to kick off with a picture of the original schooner America, and I think it was interesting for me to notice that New Zealand didn't compete for the America's Cup until 1987. When you were a kid, when you were growing up, did you have a fascination for the America's Cup?
Well, I guess growing up in New Zealand, especially, you're surrounded by water, and so you're very close to the water. I was very fortunate because my father he was in the Navy in the war and served on the Gambia, and then came back here and was involved in mullet boat sailing in the Waitemata here, and also he was pretty handy on the tools, so he built me a little P class and introduced me to sailing, and so I got to know most of my mates through that whole introduction to sailing, and guys that I've sailed with over the years have been guys I met when I was just a kid. So you always dreamed of the highest sort of part of the sport, and for us it was the America's Cup, and it was at that stage it was a dream, for that, until Michael Fay came along and actually put up a challenge and really gave New Zealand a starting point that we had a chance to win.
Wonderful. Well, you mentioned introduction. Let's just give the viewers an introduction to the America's Cup. And this is a little bit of history of the Cup from its very early days right up until the 80s. And thank you very much to Alinghi for letting us have this footage. Just a little bit of the history of this amazing competition, and it all started for you, Brad, actually with the Australia 2 campaign. Just explain how that was.
Well, I'm a sailmaker by profession, and so I was wound up working for North Sails in New Zealand, and Tom Schneckenberg was in charge of the sail development with Australia II, and so I wound up being seconded into that group and working as a sailmaker, which was quite a amazing time for me. But being involved with that group in the beginning, but working through the boat launching in Perth and seeing it's evolving. But I never really did get to America because I wound up taking a job sailing a Admiral's Cup boat for Peter Blake and the New Zealand team in Cowes.
Okay, and you were just 23, something like that, 23 years old, and you were with those incredible characters from sailing, incredible knowledge in sailing. What did you learn, Brad, in that project with the Australia II?
Well, I guess it's the America's Cup's a real design race, and so it's the technology is paramount in what goes on, and so guys like Ben Lexon, are amazing the way they went about things and wound up designing a boat like they got. But the Americans were super strong and had a very aggressive way of defending the Cup for 132 years. So it took something pretty special to fly it out of there. And in the end, when Australia won in '83, it sort of changed the roadmap for everybody else in the world to have a go. And we should be ever thankful to them for that.
I mean, it certainly did change the roadmap, and not just away from the 12 metres. And here's a picture, thank you very much, Carlo Borlenghi, of the first ever New Zealand team in the Louis Vuitton Cup, 1987, in Fremantle, Australia. Chris Dixon was the skipper, and you were on as the tactician. You were under 30 years of age, weren't you, Brad?
Yeah, that picture's not of that picture's of K1, which is a boat that they did a dog match in '88. Actually, we were sailed a boat called Kiwi Magic, which was a glass 12 metre, the first glass 12, or actually it wasn't the first one, it was about the third glass 12 metre, because we built several KZ3 and KZ5. But we were a very young crew, the youngest crew there. And actually we had a very, very good chance of winning it. It's just that we just didn't have the, I guess we weren't sort of old enough to know enough of the tricks and the way we should go about trying to win. We had a very good boat, but we just, in the end, we just couldn't quite get past Connor.
And how did you get on that team at that young age?
Actually, I was match racing, and so I was sail making for North Sails in New Zealand, and I was also had a match racing series going on around the world, and you basically in New Zealand there was a lot of skippers or young guys trying out, and we were sailing Stewart 34s week in, week out with very, very good owners, and a guy named Bill Miller ran the class really, and he was instrumental for me to get involved in that and sort of help me in my early years. But that class, we were match racing all the time, and I did the local match racing series and did very well, and Faye offered me a job to try out for one of the crew in Fremantle. So I went to Fremantle and wound up doing tactics with Chris Dixon.
Wow. And also that year, New Zealand won the Admiral's Cup for the first time. You came to Cowes, and a fantastic victory. Were you all pros at that stage?
Well, after the America's Cup, we did actually have. Well, I had 2 years of full professional exposure to the way that America's Cup team was run. A big team of people and a lot of big problems building masts and getting boats to work properly. And so the guys, when I got the opportunity to sail aboard Propaganda, they weren't doing very well, and the owners approached me to take over. I bought a bunch of the guys that I'd sailed with in Fremantle, and also in my early career that were very good sailors, and guys like Kevin Shoebridge, a bunch of others that we put on board there, and we wound up with an extremely good team. And wound up, Peter Lester was sailing a boat called Fair Share, and we beat them in the trials. But I always thought my attribute was more tactical, and so I got him on board to do the steering, and the lion's share of the steering, and I did the tactics. And so we had a great navigator and great trimmers and all that sort of thing. So it ended up a very strong team.
And had you come to Cowes before?
Well, I'd been there the time before with Peter Blake in a boat called Lady B, where we raced. I think Shockwave was a member of the team, and I can't remember the other boat. But we had a go, but we just weren't anywhere near winning something like the Admiral's Cup, which is an incredibly hard regatta to win in those days. And I'm sure if it was still going, it would still be incredibly hard to win.
Okay. So from the Louis Vuitton and the Admiral's Cup, I mean, New Zealand were dominating the sailing scene at the time, and no more so than Steinlager II in the Whitbread in 1989. With Peter Blake, you won all 6 legs. Now, nobody'd ever done that in the Round the World race and has never done it since. It was an incredible performance. You had some really good prep beforehand with Fisher and Paykel, didn't you? How did that play in the overall thing?
Well, I think the teams were poles apart, really. I mean, I think in terms of, we were never really got close to one another. We sailed against each other, I think, one weekend before the race, before we left to go to the UK. But one was a masthead catch and the other was a fractional catch, and we were both far boats, and we both had separate design roads that we'd gone down, but come up with reasonably similar solution. And Steinlager II was just a little bit longer, a little bit heavier, had more sail, and it was just a quicker boat, and I think better optimised. But Fisher and Paykel was a good boat in its own right, and it had a good crew on board for sure. They had a great crew, and they were a bit unlucky dropping their mizzen, I think, on the first leg, but and we were a bit fortunate not dropping our mizzen on the last leg. So it was one of those things. And Blake had done the race so many times, and he was a consummate offshore sailor, that guy, and he taught not just me but all the guys that sailed on board how to sail in ocean racing, how to cope with the weather, how to basically be a seaman, a very, very good seaman, have very, very good boat handling and keeping capabilities, which we've kept to this day. I mean, we're all students of his.
And you just sort of said that in passing, that you nearly dropped the mizzen on the last leg. I mean, as I understand it from my good friend Mike Broughton, that you were on the helm at the time, and in those days, if you didn't finish the leg, you didn't win the race. That's how close it would have been, hey?
Yeah, he certainly got a bit chicken winged up, old Peter Blake, when that happened. But going downwind into a head sea, so it was quite lumpy, and all the shrouds were connected to titanium chain plates, and the titanium chain plate at the back was a big piece of metal that held onto the shrouds of the mizzen, and also the runners from the topmast or of the mainmast. And it wasn't blowing that hard, but we punched it a few T's, and then you could hear there was quite a big bang, and it didn't quite go. But the guys on deck, actually, Tony Ray was instrumental in that, and Dean Phipps, is that we actually just jibed the boat without changing anything, and he pulled the main sheet in and left it in the middle, which held the mast up, the main mast, and we managed to, Dean and a bunch of the other guys on board managed to drop the mizzen, and we were on the other side, the spinnaker pole, because we had a spinnaker pole in those days, and carried on, and then we actually wound up one of the crew guys, Barry Mackay, chopped a bit of the engine block or engine base off the cradle for the engine, and we jimmied up two chain plates on the back and bolted them in, and managed to, end the race fully whipped up in terms of pulling the mizzen back up and having the big sails up. So we won that leg, which was amazing, really, for what happened.
Yeah, that's some amazing Kiwi engineering. I think I can get away with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible for me to brush over, an entire Whitbread 89, but, we're going to go through 7 America's Cups in this talk, but an amazing performance, which I'm sure anybody who was around that time watched Steinlager II, and I really like the shirts, by the way. Have you still got one of those?
Yeah, I think I've got a couple around. You see the odd one pop up because, New Zealanders don't throw much away. Don't throw much away down here.
Okay, so 1992, Louis Vuitton Cup, San Diego, and this was in the final. You were absolutely handing it to Il Moro di Venezia. We've got some stats down there. I mean, you were winning 3-1. You only lost one race by 1 second. You were absolutely handing it to the Italians. And then race 5, protest. I don't think anybody wants to go into the massive detail of the protest, but it was to do with how you were using the pole configuration and whatever. But then you lost 4 on the bounce. Did you get distracted, Brad?
Actually, I wasn't sailing on the boat until the last 2 races. The Rod Davis and David Barnes were sailing the boat, and I think they were doing as good a job as you possibly could. They'd been training all the way through it. I didn't get to San Diego until about the last 10 months because I wasn't invited. And Russell Coates didn't make the main helmsman, so he called me up and said, "Do you want to come over and we're going to sail a backup boat and try and push the A team," which I was right into. But in the end, the Michael Fay and his management, they sort of lost confidence with the guys that were doing it, and so they put us two, which was a wrong move totally, on board, and we were losing. But in reality, that it was a lot bigger boat. It was a lot different boat than NZL20, which was a light displacement, smaller sail area boat than El Moro, and also El Moro was way off the pace versus America Cubed, which was Bill Coke, who was the defender, and they actually wound up defending easily, which made the defenders or the challengers look pretty hopeless, really.
But it might be an interesting opportunity here to say something to the tacticians watching this. When there's a protest going on, in those days, I mean, you were telling me you were up till the early hours of the morning. You got, there was a distraction. What would you say to a tactician? He comes to you and says, "Brad, I got distracted. What should I have done?" What would you say?
Well, I guess nowadays you wouldn't bother with any of that in terms of, especially if you're an America's Cup team, you shouldn't be fronting any of the protests that are technical protests, that was a technical protest. Nowadays everything's decided on the water, but if there is a protest on measurement, it's usually before the regatta starts. And but there's always, in the Cup, there's always, tricks like that where, everybody's got a few protests up their sleeve that they can have a go on measurement and whatever. Mm-hmm. And really, we suffered them in 2007. We had a couple of protests on measurement that I never even bothered going to because they were never, there wasn't much credence to them, and it never went through. So you really, most of your effort should be on, sailing the boat fast and job as well as you possibly can do, and sure, being up to date and know what's going on, but not burning the midnight hours trying to defend the team when you've got a big job the next day.
Okay, good advice. Let's go on. 1995. I'm sure that's a year that you will remember, to say the least. Let's start with the Louis Vuitton final in San Diego against One Australia. And in my research, I got the flavour that it was a bit of a grudge match. The Aussies had built 3 boats, and there was a lot of banter going on before you actually took them on in the final, Brad. Is that fair to say?
Oh, for sure. We thought that they needed reeling 3 boats, building 3 boats, and we pushed hard on the rules side of it to get that sorted out before we got to San Diego. I can't remember what the outcome was of it, because it wasn't really on the sailors' list. We didn't really bother with it, because we still, in the end of the day, you have to beat everybody to win. So we just knew we had to wind up with a better boat and sail the boat quicker, and wind up beating them on the water, which is what really happened. I mean, they had they had a catastrophic failure with their best boat during their regatta, and they had to sail their first boat, or their second boat, in the actual Louis Vuitton final. But it was quite something to see their race boat break in half and sink to the bottom, it's pretty deep over there. I think it's about 400 metres, so it's a long way down.
Wow. And obviously you won that Louis Vuitton final convincingly against One Australia 5-1, and then that meant that you went into the match for the cup. And I'm going to just keep on this screen for now, because pressure comes in then, doesn't it? And we hear about this from Olympic athletes, from America's Cup athletes. The pressure starts to mount, and that's something you've got to learn to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think, we had an extremely good team there. Ed Baird, he was our coach, but he liked the word coach, but he wasn't really the coach. He sailed the backup boat against us, and he was of such a high quality that we had incredibly good racing in house with the crews that we could put together. But with having 2 great helmsmen like Coots and Ed going at it, it was pretty beneficial that when we got to the actual match, we were very focused on just winning races. We never counted how many we'd won. Each day we'd just try and go out there and win a yacht race. And so it was a special group, I think, and the effort was fantastic, and the end result obviously was really good.
And the match against Mr. America's Cup, as he became known, Dennis Conner, with Young America. We'll come to that in a sec, but just look at the stats there. The deltas, the closest, you beat them 5-0, and the closest delta was 150, 151. I mean, it wasn't even close.
Yeah, I actually think that the Australian boat, One Australia, was a better boat for sure than Young America. But Young America was a boat that they'd basically borrowed off one of the other teams that they'd beaten. And actually, probably the fastest boat there was actually Bill Cloke's boat, Bill Coke, Mighty Mary, which he had a women's team sailing, and they came within a hair of being the defender, but unfortunately did too many jibes down the last run of their race with Dennis and lost. And but we wound up racing these guys. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. I mean, our biggest problem there was just not doing something silly, not being over the line at the start, not fouling the other boat. We felt that we had a nice edge, and that we just had to sail reasonably conservatively and just end it as soon as we possibly could.
Yeah, again, some stats that I've pulled off the web. I'm hoping they're correct. 93% of the 260 legs in that regatta, you were in the lead. I mean, that's, unbelievably dominant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that stage, when we lost, when Team New Zealand decided to go again, and Peter Blake was the leader of that team, and Coots got the nod to be the skipper. He went off and got right into the design side of it, having a engineering background, and so we wound up with some fantastic guys designing boats for us, like Laurie Davidson did a great job, Doug Peterson, Jerry Milgram was on our design team at that stage, and so we had a lot of depth from the last cup that went into the next one, and so that was pretty strong. I would say we would have had the strongest design team by quite a way, and we had a great group as far as boat builders, the sailors, the sailmakers. We had a fantastic group.
Yeah, I'm just going to hone in on a couple of people in the team, on the sailing team. Tom Schnackenberg as navigator. What did Tom bring to that team?
Well, I guess Tom, he brought a lot other than being the navigator. Navigator was just one part of his. I think in those days he was the design coordinator, so he was doing many roles, and so he was having to deal with the designers and make sure that we wound up getting the boats that we wanted and getting a boat that was fast enough to win. So he had a lot going on, and I remember the first race of the actual cup, I think, when all the instruments went down in the first race, disappeared downstairs, and I don't think he came up until the third leg. But we managed to find the marks and get around the course. But he was very, very cool and calm about it. Didn't seem to worry him, but certainly worried me. But anyway, he did a great job, and obviously he was one of the first guys I worked for as a sailmaker, and one of the guys that sort of set me in the right road, really.
Yeah, and also want to focus in on two of your wind sniffers, Murray Jones and Rick Dodson. What part did they play on board the boat?
Well, they're both very good yachtsmen in their own right, and Richard did a great job. He used to handle the runners at the back of the boat, and was involved in just the strategy on that side of it. And Murray was up the mast. He would do the up the mast part of the regatta. And of course, San Diego's a 9-knot venue, so trying to be able to find the breeze and where it's coming from, and each puff counts. And so, having a guy with his talents, calling where you should go gives you a lot of confidence for a guy like me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's pull up this screen. And we've got a tiny bit of video. Thank you very much, Alinghi. And it's a mixture of celebrations from San Diego and from Auckland. So I'll just play that, and then maybe we can get a few words from you, from Brad. The America's Cup goes to New Zealand, first time in the history of the nation, right up there, with New Zealand's well known for the All Blacks for the rugby, but it was as big as that, wasn't it, Brad?
Oh yes, we were quite surprised of the impact that it had on New Zealand when we got back. You can see that's the day that we won. That's just tied up against the San Diego Yacht Club, and there's some champagne in the cup, but not much. The actual cup's a bit of a crappy piece of silverware because it's not hollow. It's just got a little lip in it. So but that was probably enough to get Russell drunk already. So anyway, he had a sip out of it, and the other footage of him carrying it down is actually we stole it from the press briefing that night and took it back to the our compound for the party, which was dangerous to say the least. And all that sort of thing was a great time. I mean, Peter Blake he couldn't speak at the press conference, so we had to help him out. And there was there was a big moment. And then when we got back to New Zealand, obviously, you could see the crowds, which New Zealand had gone through, quite a few years of trying to rebuild, under a bit of a Labour government. So things weren't great. And then this came along, and there was a lot of money spent on the infrastructure downtown Auckland, and made a big difference to Auckland, and then I think to the psyche of New Zealand. And things got better and better, and certainly they've got a lot better down here.
And Auckland known as the city of sails, but I've also heard it said that the city was massively developed on the back of the America's Cup. I mean, it was a huge economic boost for New Zealand, wasn't it?
It still is. So, down this time, I think the government will probably put in over $300 million into infrastructure spend and sort of try to support the Cup down here for this time, which I think won't, but it doesn't bode too good, because it'll be more like just a local contest without with what's happened with COVID-19. But the Cup's has a big difference to New Zealand and Auckland in particular.
Yeah. Very interesting subject. Obviously, the next America's Cup. Let's go there now, then, Brad. What do you see happening in Auckland? Is it going to go ahead on time?
Well, yeah, I would say it's going to go ahead on time. It's going to happen, and it's going to be a pretty much a local regatta, I think, and it's going to be tough to get a lot of overseas spectators down here. For they'd have to at the moment they'd have to self-isolate for 2 weeks, which is going to make pretty hard to get the very wealthy guys to come down here and sit there for 2 weeks, not doing much, and just to watch the yacht racing. And I think most of the teams will get in. Hopefully the government here will smell the coffee and just let the teams come as soon as they possibly can and set themselves up, because they're going to be racing here in December. It's not that far away in Cup terms, in terms of getting yourself set up and getting all your systems right so that you can actually go racing.
Right. Okay. That was not in the script. We were going to talk about that, but it's interesting to get your views. And at the moment, that's how you see it. And I guess looking at the Olympic Games, other big sporting events, they're sort of seeing the same thing. So, the TV coverage is going to be probably huge, but as you say, the scenes of those spectators, in the race village and everything else, we're very unlikely to see, aren't we?
Yeah, hopefully we'll just still see good racing and hopefully a bit of close racing. But maybe being the first edition of these boats, the boats could be a ways apart.
Okay. Wind back 2000, America's Cup in Auckland, New Zealand, against Prada, and they came with a big campaign. I noticed as well, Peter Blake not on the boat, and there were a few rumblings amongst the press. What was actually going on at that time? That's what I could sort of pick out.
Well, I mean, Peter Blake wasn't. We actually for the '95 campaign. He was instrumental in terms of we were getting the money to do it and making sure that we could buy a new sail or build a new mast or make a new set of wings or something like that. And all the money becomes pretty tight at the end of those regattas, and having him on board made it a lot easier to justify that sort of thing. He saw it firsthand, and we were big fans of that. And also it's quite a a lively contest, and the guys were a lot different than they were going forward in the event. Auckland was a totally different beast, and he didn't sail day in, day out like we did. There was a lot of guys trying out for those positions, and I don't think he was even interested in sailing on board the boat. Okay. So he had a lot of other problems that he had to face, and so that was sort of left. All that part of it was left to Russell and myself and the other guys, and so once again we came up with a pretty nice boat, Laurie Davidson, and did a fantastic job, and we wound up with a boat that was just a little bit better and a bit more manoeuvrable than Luna Rossa, and we wound up beating them. We had a couple of real close calls, but overall, I think you have to win 5 races. So you think you're going to win 5 races. We did. We thought we'd win 5 races first. Yeah,
and now that you'd got the cup to Auckland, was there a fortress mentality to this defence of the cup?
Well, actually, we set out to have a fortress mentality, so we didn't really make it that user friendly for the challenges, and sort of even though they built the viaduct and there was a lot of teams in there, we were we fought over the water space where we would sail a regatta and how much time we could have on that, and so there was a lot of things that are important to America's Cup teams that the defender can sort of decide on, and we were pretty aggressive in terms of how we went about all that, and pretty tough, I think. But we'd learnt that from the years before and watching the Americans and how they defended it. So we were just sort of putting in practice what we'd learnt.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that you did a lot of detailed weather testing in San Diego for the '95 Cup, and obviously the Hauraki Gulf is one of a kind. And I'm sure you had fantastic weather data from that. And I also heard perhaps the other team weren't allowed to get on that course too much.
That's right, they were. So we would actually only give it to them, I think, 1 day a week, and the rest of the time we'd sail on it. And we'd often sail through their finish line and get told off. But, we were pretty aggressive with all that. But in the end, I think we would have won on any of the courses, but we knew that part of the world very well, and obviously we still do.
And in an emphatic defence again, 5-0 for the second match running against Prada, seriously put them away, and I'm sure massive celebrations in New Zealand as well. This time straight from the off. Then I'm going to pull up another slide. Alinghi. 2003 America's Cup. But obviously something's gone on before then. Just tell us, as much as you want to tell us, what happened between the 2000 America's Cup with Team New Zealand and the creation of Alinghi.
Oh, well, what happened was that Peter Blake this was going to be his last, the 2000 last go at this. He wanted to do something else. He really didn't really enjoy the cut and thrust of the cup that much, and he'd done it all really, and so he wanted to move on. And so he told me that he was going to go off and actually run the Cousteau Society, but he was very keen on the planet and doing his bit to try and save it from us, really, and that's what he was decided to do. And so Russell and I, and actually Tom Stackenberg, approached there was a board of trustees that controlled the team, and we looked at trying to have some transition between that group and ourselves. And just over time they made it incredibly hard, and I think at the end the sponsors that had a bit of control over the board, they really didn't like the fact that us guys would be up there and running the show, and so they sort of made it hard. The harder they made it, the more we sort of lost interest, and so it got to a point where basically we just said, "Oh, like okay, that's it. We won't do it. We'll just move on." And actually, Russell was keen to let the team evolve and get other people in there to do it rather than announce that. And so we actually delayed the announcement of us leaving, which didn't bode too well in the New Zealand press. And there was a few pretty parochial press guys on radio and TV here that took aim at Russell and I and a couple of other members of the team. And so it became a grudge match. If you wanted a grudge match, they got one.
Right. I mean, that must have been emotionally a very tough time for you.
Yeah, but it's just one of those things, It's actually a sport, and actually the America's Cup's a sport between yacht clubs. It doesn't really have much to do with nations, even though they pull it in to be a thing between nations. And so, yes, it was a big deal for New Zealand, and yes, I probably I wasn't that keen on not doing it for New Zealand, but in the end, it was just obvious that they didn't want us to do it in that capacity, and we were growing as a group, and so we just moved on. And then we looked at other options that were out there, and one was Larry Ellison with Oracle, and the other one was Ernesto Bettorelli with Alinghi. But Ernesto had a clean sheet of paper, and actually I did an interview with Larry, but he wanted Chris Dixon to sail a boat. And so, I already had Russell, and so it was either Russell or nobody, really. So, actually, we wound up meeting Ernesto and putting something together, and then Alinghi sort of came from that. Wow. But a lot of the things we learned were from Ernesto. Ernesto had a huge wealth of knowledge and project management, and a lot of more of a European style of things, way to do things. And so, for me, I learned, unbelievably amount from him and his group that he brought to the team.
Right. Back to the sailing. So, Alinghi, Louis Vuitton Cup, 2003 in New Zealand. You've got to win the Louis Vuitton to get to the match, and there we got a picture of the team finishing the competition, and the big competition in the Louis Vuitton was BMW Oracle and Prada, and you put them both away. I mean, with a team that had just been put together. What were the key factors in winning the Louis Vuitton Cup for Alinghi?
Well, I think that once again it's the software, it's not the hardware. Even though you look, there's Rolf Rolex sitting in that picture. I mean, he's obviously instrumental in all of Alinghi's wins. Fantastic, did a fantastic job. But you got a lot of guys there that have done cups for different teams. You got Josh, who's met with the American team with Bill Quote. You've got Chico did it with Prada. We've got a bunch of guys. John Barnett did it with Dennis. And we had a bunch of younger guys too that were amazing. Pete Van Nieuwenhausen.
Yeah.
We had a very strong, solid group. Obviously anchored by a lot of the Kiwi guys that have just won the cup twice. So, we're very strong. Warwick Frury, Simon Daubney, Dean Phipps, all real strong parts of our group. But we went to another level with Alinghi, and Russell was instrumental in that as well. Did a fantastic job with that, and we were obviously highly motivated because we were getting hammered, personally. So tough when you poke the bear like that.
Let's a bit of fun here. Thanks, Carlo, for this one. I don't think I've ever seen this photo before. I just really wanted to ask, who's under the cup? Who's under the Louis Vuitton Cup?
Josh Belsky.
Okay.
And after that, we've actually done a lot of sailing in the UK with Sir Peter Ogden on Jet2, and we've had a huge fun with that crew, and obviously Josh was instrumental and key for all of that.
Yeah, I tell you what, you're very good at dodging the fun photographs, Brad. I'm trying to find the one with you, on the champagne or whatever it is, and you seem to escape the lens quite well. It's very tactical.
I actually wasn't there. I had penicillin poisoning.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I went home.
Okay, Louis Vuitton Cup squared away and into the match for the America's Cup with Team New Zealand, with the heart of the team that had won the Cup in 2000 or defended the Cup in 2000. Emotions must have been running high for you and certainly, I'm sure the whole team, but must have been running high for you. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, I mean we were pretty focused, eh? So we had a lot of we were very focused on what we were trying to achieve, and Ernesto, he was pretty wound up in terms of how close here we are in the America's Cup, the first time with a new team. So pretty an amazing moment for us. On the other side of the coin, you had that trying to defend for the second time, and Team New Zealand were still very strong, but the boat itself, they put a lot of emphasis on the design side of it, and went for that hula, which was like another skin that was away from the hull, and also they were really pushed the boat beyond its limits, and so it broke a couple of times, which was catastrophic for those guys.
Yeah, I mean the Team New Zealand, the 82, I believe it was. It nearly sank in the first race, and then this is later in the match. I mean, just what were your feelings when you saw the boat breaking like that? What was going through your head when you saw all that going on?
I guess it's hard to say. We knew it was going to happen, but the day one they had a folded up mainsail in the stern of the boat, and when we started, one of my mates, Matthew Mitchell, he had a bucket down the back of the boat bailing water out of it, and we started right at the upper end of the wind limit. So they were loading the boat up right at its maximum, and then I think in the end the tack fitting blew off the Genoa and they actually pulled out. But and then on that day where the mast broke, they had 6000 series aluminium tip cups on those rigs, and you have to really be careful with those, and it can win you regattas, but it also can lose you regattas, and that's where they wound up that day, which was they were just to leeward us, and we just backed straight off because it was quite a lumpy nor'easterly in Auckland, and it could get pretty sporty going up there in one of those things. So
but they must have been so sad for the team, home waters, to have failure like that. But to be fair, they put up a hell of a fight. I know you won 5-0, but apart from the two retirements, they pushed you all the way, didn't they?
Oh yeah. Oh look, the boat they built was a good, it was a pretty good boat. It probably, without the hula or the skin that they put on it, it might have been a little bit quicker, maybe. I don't know, but there was no question, and they, good sailors. Those guys, all very good sailors. I mean, at that level, you're up against guys that, at least you're equal. So, it's just the little things that come together at the end, and the optimization, keeping the optimization of the boat going all the way through and up to the America's Cup, and maybe a little bit in the America's Cup, can be the difference between winning and losing.
And we've got Bertarelli there spraying the champagne. The Cup's heading to Europe for the first time ever in the 155-year history of the Cup. Bertarelli, he must have been overjoyed.
Oh, for sure. I know he was over the moon. And, it's, we were very fortunate to wind up, having an association with a young guy like him that is very motivated and keen to do well, and doesn't leave anything on the course. He wants to try his hardest to win, but he's very particular about how we go about it, and so we have to be as professional as we possibly can and business-like. He doesn't want to waste money, and he doesn't see that as a great idea. So we learnt a lot. Like I said, I learned a hell of a lot from him, and he was totally over the moon to have won on his first shot at it.
And for me, this picture really tells a story about that cup. I mean, there's you, there's Schumann and Coates, and the elation of winning the cup is all over your faces. Was it really like that? I mean, the press must have been hammering you in New Zealand for taking the cup away. I mean, what was it? Mixed feelings for you? How did it work?
Oh, it was sort of over by then. They were hammering us before that, a long time before that. So it was that this was more vindication, and and also it was life changing in terms of what happened to us guys, and it was a professional job, and so we were remunerated for it, and that was it was life changing for us.
Right.
And guys like just the quality of our group, a guy like Joachim Schumann, gold medals clanging around his neck, he's a guy, he'd be a asset to any team.
Yeah, actually quite interesting. You've got Jochen, who's a gold medalist in the Finn. I think Russell won the Laser World Championship, didn't he?
He won a gold medal in the Finn.
And
in LA.
And you're a long way away from me. I know you've come second in the Etchells. What's your biggest win in a little boat, Brad?
Oh, probably that.
Second in the Etchells.
I think we were robbed.
Who beat you?
I think the boat builder beat us.
I'll tell you, there'll be a few of the Etchells crowd in cows watching this. They'll know what I was talking about there. But let's move on to 2007. The America's Cup, for the first time in 155 years, is held in Europe, and Valencia in Spain was chosen. And Coates left Team Alinghi in 2004, joining BMW Oracle. You'd been together for so long. Was that a tough break for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want anything to do with it because it was just between him and Nesto, and it was basically nonsense. But anyway, that's, you can't control human behaviour, and so Russell decided to go. And they came to whatever agreement, and he left very early on in the piece. But we had most of the building blocks was set in place, and we got sort of back going. We needed, basically we needed some guys that could steer the boats, and so we hired Peter Homburg after the Cup in Auckland, and then when Russell left, I reached out to Ed Baird to see if he'd be interested. And, most people really don't know the relationship between Ed Baird and New Zealand, other than he was involved in Team New Zealand in 95. But, he did such a stellar job there. And also for the Cup in Valencia, he did a fantastic job. So did Peter Homburg. Peter Homburg and him developed the boats through them sailing the boats, and Joachim was trying out for that spot. But Ed is, he's just a tradesman at steering boats like that, and also, he was incredibly calm, and even more so that time. And he a lot of what he did and a lot of how we sailed over the Axe, but we were all sailing against the other challengers through those regattas. He did a fantastic job, and he was MVP for me.
Right. Okay. Baird, as you say, up against Schumann, Baird, Holmberg. I mean, all fantastic. So Baird got the job, and you explained very well why. You took on the role of skipper. How did that change things for you?
Not that much. I just took on a bit more of the responsibility with everything. But we had key people in all the good positions. Grant Simmer was the design coordinator, and he was helping manage the team. But we had key people in each area. Rolf did a fantastic job again. Wound up with SUI 100, which was, it was the fastest. Is still the fastest of those boats out there. And we had a great sailing team. And with Ed sailing the boat, we had Juan Vila came in and did the navigation. Ernesto moved into the back of the boat and was there. So he was totally up to speed with it. How the boat was sailed and a key member of it. So it worked pretty bloody well, really.
Okay, the next slide is some stats before we watch an amazing video from the 2007 America's Cup. But this just shows the intensity of the competition between Alinghi and Emirates Team New Zealand. Were the wounds still open? Was that really driving it on out there, or was it just two amazing teams going toe to toe?
Well, the management between Team New Zealand, so I think Tom Schneckenberg and Ross Blackman were managing the group in 2003, and then Grant Dalton took over for the regatta in Valencia. So he's got his own siege mentality, good old Dalton. So he was, he either made it easier or harder for those guys, but there wasn't much love lost between the groups. But having said that, a lot of those guys are good friends of mine. Dean Barker, I have ultimate faith in him. As a sailor, he's a fantastic yachtsman. And there's a bunch of guys on that boat. They're at a very high level. Like I say, when you get to the end like that, you're up against guys that are just as good as you. There's nothing really in it. And just identifying small things that make a difference can win you the regatta. And that's pretty much what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, Alinghi defended the cup 5-2, but you can just see the tiny deltas in every race, how close it was, and here's a film. When I saw this, I'm not joking. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck. Let's just watch the finish of that deciding race in the 2007 match.
25 seconds to go as we come up to the start of the first race of the 32nd America's Cup. Kiwis are faster. Alinghi pushing hard. We'll be ahead at the top mark. It's all about positioning. Yellow flag. It's a yellow flag. Alinghi now have a problem. We can see the pole that's come off the tack on Alinghi. There's chaos down towards the finish.
Extraordinary match.
I mean, just wow. What was that like on board when you crossed the line, looked over, and got it by 2 seconds?
Actually, that race was, we led around the top mark. We just couldn't jive. We had a symmetrical sail up, and we wound up not doing much racing, jibing a symmetrical, and we couldn't jibe it for some reason, or it was asymmetric, that A3 or whatever it was. So we couldn't jibe it properly, so they passed us down the run, and then eventually we got them at the top mark with a dial down. And at that stage, the course was actually falling apart with the bottom mark or the finish line. They'd gone into no wind and they'd moved the finish line. But I turned the radio down because we were trying to explain the manoeuvre of the dial down to everybody what was going to happen. And we missed that. So the actual finish line, we would have jibed a lot sooner. I sort of fitted one Vila, who, by the way, he's the guy as far as navigation, and he's one of the best tactical navigators in the world, if not the best. So he did a great job. But Ed Baird knew we were going to win. He, as soon as he looked at it, he said, "Oh no, we'll beat them here."
Right.
So
tight call,
I
Ed.
said, "Okay." Yeah.
But tell us how.
You got this one.
Sorry, Brad.
I said, "You got this one.
That's
all yours."
Brad, tell us how the conditions in Valencia played a part in that intensity.
Well, the right was super favoured, so, it was a lot of pressure on the helmsman to get the right at the start and be able to go right. And it was just the way everybody knew the roadmap. It would have to be a very different day than just a building sea breeze, which is what we got. There was a fantastic venue in the end. I saw it from the beginning, where the place was just an old fishing village and pretty crappy down on the waterfront, and the cut absolutely changed that town, and especially on the water side of it, made it quite special. And the time there was absolutely amazing what they built there. Ernesto put in. I saw it from behind the scenes, so the amount of investment he helped with. They ran out of money building some of the bases. He had to put deposits down, and he got it back for sure. But he had the foresight and the to be able to push that through. And the Spanish government did a fantastic job in spending a lot of money and upgrading Valencia. A bit like what's happened here in New Zealand.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. As you say, built a viaduct and all the infrastructure around it, but it's still being used very much today. Valencia is a huge centre for all sorts of maritime companies, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and they built that whole, they dug a huge channel. Oh, God knows how many Roman ruins they went through to get from there to the sea, but they did, and
okay,
pretty special.
Now, I better be careful what I say here, but we've gone to spaceships, and this is Alinghi 5, and there was a huge legal battle going on for I don't know how many, at least a couple of years, around the America's Cup, which led to the development of Alinghi 5 and BMW Oracle's solid wing catamaran. Had a bit of the gloss gone off the cup when all that was going on, Brad?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think, realistic, my point of view, it's nonsense, and there was quite a few teams lining up to have a go. And, there was a real push by Oracle and their media side to, discount what we were trying to do, and everything you did wasn't the right thing and could be done better and whatever. And, even in the challenge, because we were hosted by Spain, they took a challenge from an association of clubs in Spain that went to court in the US, and Oracle had the next challenger of record, and so that whole thing took years. Teams fell by the wayside, and the boats themselves look, they're amazing. The technology that went into them, absolutely amazing. The wing, all that stuff, great. Was it good for the sport? In my position, no way. It was just a waste of money and effort. And, you could have had a lot better outcome with more participants, but that's not the America's Cup. That's the rules of it. And it's difficult, but, really could have fixed a few small countries' deficit with what went into it.
Wow. And you mentioned a few names there, Rolf of Rolex, who you've done an awful lot of work with with Alinghi in the monohulls. I believe he designed this boat. I was lucky enough to come out to Ras Al Khaimah when you had the boat there, and I saw you had the likes of Loic Perron there and Grant Simmer. What was it like working with them? Did you enjoy working with those people?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, sure. Louis Perron, fantastic sailor. There was a lot of good French sailors that we got involved, but it was so coarse. The whole thing was coarse, and it was a space race. And so it really came down to being able to build that wing or not. In hindsight, you could say, well, we should have just built a 50-foot foiling boat. We probably would have won by a couple of miles, right. Which is where they've got to now. And so, it started all that whole process, and it's sort of, but it's, there's no way, you don't even get close to 13 challenges, and it's it did damage the cup, but it's, personally, I thought it was nonsense, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, 2010 America's Cup, Valencia, Spain, way offshore. Not the thousands of people watching from the shore, but we've got a cracking bit of video here. Thank you very much to Alinghi for allowing us to play this, and it goes into a bit of detail about the solid wing, which was for BMW Oracle, which was the game changer. It gave them in the end a decisive advantage. So let's just play that for you, and you'll see what we mean.
Well, the wing's very efficient. I mean, a sail, especially at these proportions, is dependent upon how tight you pull the sail on, and it's really at very, very high loads, 20 to 25 tonnes on the corner of the sail to keep the shape correct. With the wing, those loads go away. We can generate, for the same size wing, 2 or 3 times the amount of driving force that the sail would have. On the other hand, technically, to build the thing, it's the largest wing that's ever been made. Even the largest aeroplane is only 2/3 the size of that wing. It's a massive structure. It took all of our resources for 6 months, and so it's a bit of a gamble to go down that path, but it worked out okay thanks to a huge endeavour by the design and build team to actually get the thing sailing. The wing's really occasionally shown incredible performance and generally shows good performance, and I think that if we get those conditions that really suit the wing, it could be quite surprising to everyone how it really can turn it on. On the other hand, we've had to retrain the crew. We had to train them to look down at the instruments, because really you can't see much of the wing when you're looking up at it. It's all about the instruments and the science that went into it to get it to work.
It's probably less visual, with a soft sail it's very visual, you can look up and see what's happening. A wing gets trimmed really by instrumentation, and it's just like, we've used it before, the analogy for a pilot, like he heavily relies on his instruments when you're flying a plane, and it's actually quite similar when you start to sail with the wing.
I guess if there was one thing I'd like to know more about, I'd like to know a lot more about the wing. The team that they put together to build it, they've done a great job, because the thing is huge.
I mean, for sure the wing is a great piece of technology. They've really done a great job to push the boundaries to do that, And I think if we had the time, we would have looked very closely at it.
Everything's different, but the game's the same. It's to get around the race course in front of the other guy.
We rejoin the first race of the 33rd America's Cup
just a couple of miles up the first beat.
So we have USA at 18-19. Meanwhile, Alinghi still in the high 17s, occasionally nudging 18. But there's no doubt about it, the BMW Oracle is closing in just down to leeward ahead. Well, all the speculation that both boats would dive off, and in the huge area of the course here, they wouldn't see each other. Well, they can see the whites of the eyes of each other here.
Peter, everything I see is USA is consistently a little bit faster and a little bit higher. In any sailor's dream, if they can go higher and faster upwind, it's their best day of their life.
Interesting comment there from Cam Lewis at the end, and what I wanted to focus on, Brad, which you touched on earlier, was these were the very early days. We're looking at wing sails, we're looking at these exotic designs on foils that we've now got on the had in the AC50 and the AC75. A lot of people say, the gloss went off the cup when it went to the catamarans and the trimarans. What's your take on all that?
I guess I'm more of a traditionalist, so I like to see the boats in the water. But it's, I'd like to see, the crews being an important part of the performance of the boat, and, pulling sails up and down. I think that's part of it. And so the trickle down of this sort of part of the sport, there's not much of it that it gets involved with club sailors or, I like sailing as a pastime, and so I sail locally here in a TP52, and I've got a share in an old classic. So they're totally different racing. It's a totally different sport than what it is now. That doesn't. I'm not deterring from the fact that I think the guys that are sailing these boats are, at the top of their game, and also. When this happened, the wing, I think Mike Drummond actually came up with the idea for Oracle to build this wing. But the fact that they actually could build it and make it work was something pretty special. And they were taking huge risks, just like we were. We were taking huge risks with these boats. They were so big, so powerful, so much stress on everything. We had alarms going off all the time on the boat. So, telling us we were pushing it too hard or whatever. So, it was just a crazy time, for sure.
Yeah, and today, Brad, I'm sure, in fact, I actually witnessed you talking to a current America's Cup sailor. I happened to be in Bermuda. I didn't overhear you, I was a long way away, but you must get a lot of the current sailors in the America's Cup diving into your huge experience and asking you advice. What do they ask you, and what do you tell them?
Oh, look, it's all, history repeats itself, So I think if I look at my career and Russell's career and guys that I've done the Cup with, Murray's career, that it's, a lot of the ideas are old ideas that we've come up with with modern materials. And a lot of things have happened before, and there's there's ways around them, solutions for them that are there and accessible from guys that have done these sort of this code of racing before. So there's not a hell of a lot that's that new, and so if you can help, you try and help. But if a lot of it, some of it I don't know, but it's flying and just what's going to happen. But we're all students of the game and sort of been in it for a long time, and definitely happy to help when somebody asks me. But most of it is old knowledge.
Okay. Well, we're going to go on to an amazing boat, which I'm glad to say I've seen up close a fair few times. But before we talk about George David's Rambler, I've got a question for you from the RORC CEO, Eddie Warden-Owen. And Eddie says, you have a great knack for getting involved with the right people and the winning projects. How do you do it? Put you right on the spot.
I'm not sure about that. I just had a... Yeah. Actually, George David, he asked me to... I didn't know him really that well, which was a tragedy, really, because he's such a fantastic guy. And so when he offered me a chance to get involved with this boat, I jumped straight in. You know, I've just been... You know, timing is something also. So I've been in the right place at the right time, which has been good. And also the people that I've been with have been... You know, it's been a special time in our career. So it's, you know, we've been lucky that we've been a group together and we've been sought after. So all those things have sort of added up.
Yeah, and George David comes from an engineering background, and you know this is actually the first boat that he's had built for himself. He's had boats in the past, but he's bought into highly successful boats before. 1K design, 88-foot canting keel, side foils, water ballast. I've been down below on this. It is like going on the Starship Enterprise when you go on board and see all the electronics, etc. You know, what? Just tell us some of the I know radical ideas about what really flicks your switch about this boat.
Well, the big difference of this boat is just the riding moment it has compared to other boats of its size. So it is a huge riding moment. The only boat that's comparable to this boat is a boat called Comanche, which is a 100-foot version that obviously everybody would have seen and known. But the 88, you know, that was being built before Comanche, so he didn't do a 100-footer. I mean, these are expensive boats and they're very technical. You know, you've got a canting keel, you've got dagger boards on either side. The rig is deck mounted and, you know, quite a long way back in the boat. So the boat is incredibly powerful, reaching and running. And, you know, he just wound up, they designed a beast, and it is a pretty big, powerful boat to sail and unbelievably fast. It's like a monohull in any breeze, so it gets up and, you know, you're 20 knots is not that quick on that boat. You're looking for 10 more knots than that, or you know, you can sit around 24 knots, 26 knots, no problem. And you know, it's incredibly tough on gear and men. So I'm fortunate I'm in the back of the boat, but you know, like a guy like George, he stepped up in his counter. He sails the boat a lot. You know, he's always, if we race around the buoys, he sails the races, and if we do an offshore race, he does his part, and he usually comes up and sails when if it's pretty windy, he's up there and he's giving it some. So yeah, he's a special guy, and you know, very, very close friend now, I think, and it's you know, he's great to the crew, and he's been great for the sport. And you know, it's been really a great couple of years to sail with him on this boat.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Brad, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you for a magnificent, fascinating look inside your incredible achievements. A last word from you.
Oh, look, I'm happy to be part of the sport. It's been good to me over the years, and I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I continue to enjoy it. And you know, the RORC has been the races we've done that RORC run have always been, you know, most of my favourites. And you know, we had a great year, I think 2 seasons ago, up and around Cowes doing the Fastnet and doing a bunch of the races beforehand. You know, it's something, a special place, and we always love the solent conditions. It's always the most trying piece of water in the world, if you ask me. So I'm looking forward to having a few more cracks at it.
Lovely. Brad, thank you so much. And this is a good opportunity for me to tell you who's going to be on the RORC Time Over Distance series next week. Same time, same place. Double Olympic medalist and the only British skipper to win the Volvo Ocean Race. The RYA Director of Racing, Ian Walker, will be joining us. Thank you very much for watching. We will play you out with a video of Rambler at full tilt in the 2019 Rolex Fastnet Race.